Welcome back to The Art of Adventure. This is episode 155 with Dougan Sherwood. The Art of Adventure is the podcast that helps you travel the world, run your business, and embark on an epic quest. I'm your host, lead explorer, and guide, Derek Loudermilk. Head over to derekloudermilk.com to check out the show notes and sign up for the Art of Adventure email newsletter where you'll get my monthly reading recommendations, adventure book club that will be starting soon. If you are looking to start a business that you can take anywhere in the world, you can head over to my coaching page and sign up for a free 30-minute strategy session with me, Coach Derek. That's what I call myself. In today's episode, we have Dougan Sherwood, who's the Director of Expansion for Cambridge Innovation Center, or CIC. And there's one here in St. Louis. It started in Boston. I interviewed him in St. Louis, and he ran the facilities before he became the Director of Global Expansion. And CIC has 1,500 companies in it or something like that. And it's been a big part of revitalizing St. Louis and parts of St. Louis. They call it the Cortex District, this innovation district. So this episode is interesting because it looks at things like the future of work and how real estate gets used and how companies are finding the spaces that they need. A lot of these cutting edge tech companies. And then how cities, like especially, Midwest, Rust Belt cities can take advantage of all these new startups, which is what St. Louis is, and just what an innovative ecosystem looks like with universities and businesses and all that kind of stuff. Very fascinating stuff. So if you're into that, this is definitely the episode for you. And here is Dougan Sherwood. Welcome back to The Art of Adventure, here with Dougan Sherwood. Welcome to the podcast, Dougan.
Thank you.
Dougan is co-founder of CIC St. Louis. CIC is also, the full acronym is Cambridge Innovation Center, started in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And now there's multiple locations, and Dougan is the Director of Expansion. St. Louis was the second location, is that correct?
Correct. First one that we ever expanded into outside of Cambridge, Massachusetts.
And how would you describe CIC?
So
for the listener?
CIC, Cambridge Innovation Center, founded in 1999. We are a full service, low risk office space that provides all the things that you need in an office, wrapped up in a really flexible month-to-month package. The idea behind CIC is that starting a business is hard, and there's already high risks and high costs associated with many early-stage ventures. And the elements of securing commercial real estate and all the costs that go into that, from the lease itself to, signing something, committing to 5 years or 10 years or something, plus all the expenses like furniture and staff and tech and conference rooms and room to grow. It's all incredibly expensive, and usually falls at the feet of the CEO of a small company. CIC many years ago began to realize that if you take away all the complexities of that and you wrap it up into a month-to-month arrangement, it's tremendously beneficial to any small company. And in addition to the sort of the savings, the economics of it, there's something really powerful about working in an environment where you are part of a community of entrepreneurs. Anybody who started a business knows how lonely that is and how terrifying it can be at times. And there is something that's very valuable and helpful when you're working alongside other people that are going through similar experiences, which, doesn't even speak yet to the value of the networking and the business development opportunities that would come from just bumping into people all day.
Yeah. And I've worked at co-working spaces in, a dozen countries or so at this point. And even here in St. Louis, there's many co-working spaces. What is what's the differentiator between CIC and, if I were to go start a co-working space and just fill a room with startup people,
Yeah, there's a couple things I would say that make us not better, but different. One is after 17 years of being in business, we have really figured out who we are as a company and what we do and what we don't do. And one of the things that we really do pride ourselves on and aspire to always be better at is customer service. So I think there are many co-working models out there. Most of them are pretty low touch, which is cool. It's lower cost too. And there's something really wonderfully grassroots about those types of initiatives. We try to be cool too, but cater to an entrepreneur where the opportunity cost of their time is a little bit higher. And so we look for, by and large, supporting entrepreneurs at any price point, at any stage in their career. So whether it's you can afford a couple $100s a month for co-working space, or you need a team for your 15-person company and you need a room that's costing thousands of dollars. We want to have something at every level, but the importance that we place on customer service and the significance of things like the Net Promoter Score that we value, I think, is something that differentiates.
What is
us.
that?
The Net Promoter Score is sort of this universal measurement of customer service. So it's the easiest way to describe what the Net Promoter Score is it says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to refer our business to your friend? And it's something that CSC asks, it's something that Apple Computer asks, it's something that Whole Foods asks, and it allows you to compare your quality of your business from a customer service perspective against, Toyota or Southwest Airlines. That's one major way. A couple other ways that I'll just sort of highlight about how we don't try to make ourselves distinct. I just say we are distinct in these regards. One is, if you come to any space in CIC, you will see tremendous effort and cost that goes into the design and build outs of our spaces. Again, trying to cater to really companies that are trying to do something really significant and important. Everything needs to work and look right. So if you've got an investor walking through the door, Derek, when you and I walked into the office, the guy behind us who sort of trailed in is an investor from one of the most interesting companies in St. Louis. The reason these guys are here, in part, is, yes, because they can move out with 30 days notice if something goes wrong. And yes, the copy machine is the right one and it's easy to get to and it's always got paper in it. But it sends the right signals to people that whether it's their need to attract the right investors or to send the right message to customers or trying to hire the right talent, those things do matter. So the optics are something that we take very seriously. And
so I want to ask you about that investor situation. So this young guy was coming in and the other guy wearing a sport coat. He said, "I'm an investor," and the kid said, "This is the company I work for." He's like, "Oh, I'm your investor." And it seemed like they were meeting for the first time. So how often are you seeing interactions? How many of these companies have venture capital investments, and what does that look like? Investing ecosystem.
It's different in different markets, of course. In Boston, where there's in the two buildings that we're in Cambridge, in Kendall Square, directly across the street from MIT, there is close to $9 billion under venture capital management in just the two buildings that we're in. So it's unlike just about any other sort of block in the world in terms of the density of capital. In St. Louis, there is very little venture capital. It's starting to come and it's starting to build from the ground up, which is awesome. But the sources of income, the sources of funding for businesses in St. Louis and cities like it are very, very different and much, much smaller. And so part of the attraction of businesses like, or our business in particular, CIC, to a place like St. Louis and other markets around the United States right now and abroad like it, is this is an opportunity for us to both get in on the ground floor of a city that we think is on the march in a positive direction, and B, help move the needle. Coming from a place like Cambridge, Massachusetts, where Harvard and MIT for years have been leaders in research and development and innovation technology and commercializing those academic resources, we've learned a tremendous amount from being part of that community. And we actually wrote down our mission statement in 2012 after 13 years of being in business. We didn't have one before because we weren't sure who we were. We started to figure out that we can actually help these growing communities in very meaningful ways, which frankly is why we're not in cities like San Francisco yet. one of the reasons why we haven't gone to places.
Because they're already more full grown.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain business reasons why we haven't gone into, namely cost. They're incredibly expensive.
Right.
But the bigger reason is that we did write down our mission statement, and we really thought critically about who are we, and what are we doing, and we really are proud of the role that we played in the Boston startup community and what we've been able to do as a small organization to be a place for organization. We are part of the town square where people congregate. And we have physical space, so it's an easy place for people to come and do their things. I really look at CIC in many ways like a platform, just like your phone. Apple doesn't make most of the apps that live on the phone. They make some, but most of them are made by others, and it's just a platform. And it took us a long time to see us in that simple light, but it's been incredibly helpful since then. And so when you think about the resources of these cities and what they have and what they don't, it's easy to see where CIC can come in and play a small but critical and important role in helping to develop these cities.
So, original CIC is near Harvard, I'm guessing?
It's literally across the street from MIT. And
okay.
two subway T stops away from the Harvard campus.
And so is it important, because we have WashU and St. Louis University and some other close universities here to CIC St. Louis, is that academic link important?
Critical. If you look at where most great technology comes from, whether it be IT or life sciences or biotechnology, clean energy, most of these things begin in a university setting. And not all, but that's where we come from. We come from an academic neighborhood, with MIT being the engine that powers the entire Kendall Square neighborhood. And we've been beneficiaries for almost 2 decades. We've always joked that the two things that would kill CSC's business would be the building burns down or MIT stops innovating. And so it is this feeder for our business. And so when we go into new cities, we do look at what are the universities there, where are they positioned, and how do we want to leverage and support what they're doing. And that's exactly where we landed with St. Louis. If you look at where we are in St. Louis, we're literally between the medical schools of St. Louis University and Washington University.
I thought it was interesting what you said about getting in on the ground floor of a city that's on the rise. St. Louis is an old city that I hope will have some resurgence. I've been reading Sam Walton's autobiography about Walmart and how he decided not to go put his stores in big cities, but focus on small towns and sort of help the people in small towns. And so it's kind of interesting parallel there where you're like, okay, St. Louis, we want to help you come back to life. What has happened since CIC came to St. Louis?
I know this is a podcast and there's no video, which is too bad because I could show this really cool graphic of the past 5 years, which include a couple of years before CIC came along. And so I don't want to confuse anybody. CIC is not, I want to cast us in the right light. We're not taking credit for the success of what's going on in St. Louis. But if you just look at the past 3 or 4 years and look at what has happened since, there is some statistic, and I don't have it here, but you could potentially, tweet it out or something. It shows that St. Louis is one of the fastest growing startup communities in terms of new startup growth in the United States. Every city has some statistic that sort of shows why they're the best. So I get that. And the real measures will be eventually where, money's raised by these startups and, jobs built and things like that. And we haven't had sort of some big Facebook type home run yet, but there is a tremendous effort in St. Louis. Give you a couple of specific examples of programs that I think are very valuable, are very hard to do, and are working well. First of all, Arch Grants is a program that began in St. Louis. It's $50,000 non-dilutive grants that are awarded to companies. And the main criterion that these companies have to meet when they receive the grant is they need to move to St. Louis, or at least to have 60 or 70% of their business based in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. It's awesome. And it's now being modeled in other cities.
So it's an incentive to relocate a business,
right?
Essentially,
yeah. And in a city like Boston, $50,000 is nothing,
right?
And so it wouldn't work in a lot of cities. But in these smaller markets, the critics would say, well, nobody would actually move their business halfway across the country, or in some cases from another country to the United States for $50,000. Well, that's not true. There are many startup companies that need $50,000, and the fact that there's no strings attached except that you need to come move your business to St. Louis is really powerful. And then lo and behold, when they get here, there are all these sorts of services and programs in this community, which is small but organized and incredibly supportive and actually serious. They stay. And I've been the beneficiary of companies that come through programs like Arch Grants or Capital Innovators, which is an accelerator program. These companies come here, start to grow up a little bit, and then move into CIC. My place is full of those companies, and it's really cool. In fact, I think the company that was meeting with their investor is one of the graduates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. What? Maybe you could just talk about some of the interesting companies that are at CIC, either in Boston or St. Louis.
Yeah. We have, so just to throw out a number that I think really gives you a sense of the sort of scope and scale of CIC. Right now, we have close to 1,500 companies that call CIC home, like today.
Wow.
So we are when you look at CIC as another co-working space, most co-working spaces are, 5,000 square feet and they have 35 or 40 companies. We are at a whole different scale. I think we're the third largest in the country in terms of this model of sort of shared office space when you look at square footage. So we've had, over the 17 years, some fascinating companies that have come through. I'm looking at this table right here and seeing some of the dried glue that sort of destroyed this really nice wooden table. And this reminds me of one of the first companies we had in St. Louis called Synek.
Okay.
SYNEK. And Synek is now actually based in Colorado. And Synek is basically Keurig for beer. They have come up with their own tabletop sort of Keurig system where you pop in beer cartridges that you get filled at whatever local brewery you're at. And rather than getting a growler, which is about a gallon of beer, that once you open it, it has to be consumed. These cartridges you can pop in and out, and they hold 10 or 12 beers, and they stack really beautifully in your refrigerator, and you just pop them in it, and you get draft beer at home.
Is it from a powder?
No, that's where the analogy to Keurig sort of breaks down. It's beer that you would, you go to your local brewery and say, give me some Fat Tire, and they tap it, and they fill the bag, but it's sealed.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so it stays fresh for as long as as if it was a fresh beer every time you poured it. And it sits on your countertop.
Because I was working on powdered beer idea for a while.
Oh, were you?
It didn't go anywhere.
Well, and the founder of this thing is he's an amazing guy. His name is Steve Young. It's not the football player, but they raised almost $800,000 on Kickstarter for this thing.
Oh, wow.
About 2.5 years ago. And that's the largest raise on Kickstarter for any company in Missouri, as far as I know. And so he's a great example of one of the companies that I think is just doing something really sort of interesting. It's easy for people to understand, and it might not work. It's still, after 2.5 years and thousands of orders, I mean, it's still a fight every single day.
Yeah.
But they moved to Boulder or to Denver because they're of the microbrewery community there.
Right. Yeah. Which is another fascinating economic study because of Colorado's law around you have to buy beer from private liquor stores rather than grocery chains. And so it forces them to have more diverse selections. So it's like creating an ecosystem.
Totally. St. Louis, which also has beer history, Budweiser, and a tremendous microbrewery community, in a way lost out to Denver because the ecosystem in Denver was more supportive, and there's more investment for these guys, and that's sort of why they ended up out there.
Yeah.
I'll give you one other just real quick example of the types of the range of companies that we have here. What really helped CIC get on the map was in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 2003. There was an entrepreneur whose name is Rich Miner who created a company down the street from CIC in Cambridge called Android. And Android got a call from West Coast company called Google, and Google was interested in their technology. long story short is the courtship led to Google acquiring Android. And the co-founder, this guy named Rich Miner, he didn't want to move his family to Mountain View, California, to be where Google was headquartered. So he moved into CSC because he was just one guy, and it was just like turnkey space. He spent 4 years at CIC building Android, and moved out in 2007 with almost 200 staff. And that was just about the coolest thing for us to sort of see and be part of. Even though we actually didn't know what they were technically working on, because they, keep things under wraps.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm sure you're up to something good.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey guys, Derek here. I want to take a quick second to talk with you about starting a location-independent business. This is something that is awesome. A lot of people are interested in it. You've probably been thinking about it for a while, listening to this podcast, and maybe you're ready to pull the trigger but don't know exactly where to start in terms of which business idea should I go with first, or do I even have a profitable business idea? Maybe you're more concerned with the travel thing. You haven't traveled abroad before, or you're wondering how to do long-term travel. There's a lot of things that are up in the air that you're wondering about. How to move existing businesses online, how to do social media and marketing and networking, whether you should have a podcast or blog or video log in accompanying your business. There's a lot to consider. So this is where I might be able to help you, because I've helped lots of aspiring digital nomads through personal coaching and business mentorship already get their businesses up and off the ground so they can travel the world full time if they want. So if you want to find out what I can help you with, I'm offering a free strategy session to listeners of The Art of Adventure. That's a 30-minute session. It's valued at $100, and we'll, in this session, dial in your real goals, what's getting in the way, and how to break through it. Awesome. This is a free session. All you need to do to claim your spot for 2017, get your year kicked off right, is email me, derek@derekloudermilk.com, or head over to our website, to the coaching page, and sign up there. But the easiest way, just email me, derek@derekloudermilk.com, and we'll chat a bit more about setting you up. Now back to the episode. There's some book out there that I haven't read, but it's asking, Boston was set up to potentially be a silicon hotspot. Silicon Valley ended up sort of, winning the race in the 60s and 70s, but there's still a ton of innovation and venture capital in Boston. So it's kind of like the second node.
In a way, yeah. And I think what's, one of the things that I think is interesting about Silicon Valley and why it's en masse, it's much bigger. But one of the things I think that makes Silicon Valley so powerful and so distinct is the fact that so many of the technologies are consumer facing. You know what eBay is, you know what Facebook is, you use an Apple computer. And so Twitter, these are things that become famous, very well known. In Cambridge, I know a lot of people who sort of sell this sort of story that, well, the real businesses are done in Boston. And these are like the cancer research technologies, the pharmaceutical companies, the B2B businesses like Hotspot that, no teenager's going to know about, or my parents won't know about. But, it's Akamai, which powers most of the internet. And so the B2C really does sort of live in the Valley in California. And I think Boston could do well by sort of finding more businesses that are consumer facing to let other people who aren't necessarily in the entrepreneurial community know about it. But the amount of venture capital that's going on in the Boston area is really second only to a couple cities in the United States, namely California and New York as the states. But the other thing I would throw out that if you actually look at research and development dollars coming out of universities, distance the neighborhoods of Harvard and MIT, which are just a few blocks from each other.
Yeah.
If you look at the actual dollars invested in research R&D coming out of the universities there, it absolutely dwarfs what's going on between Stanford University and Berkeley in the Valley. And so it's when you actually stare at sort of what's going on in Kendall Square and Harvard Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts, it really is sort of in a class by itself. It's just geographically a much smaller sort of footprint than sort of the broader Silicon Valley.
Could you maybe speak to when a startup would want to get venture capital funding? Because a lot of our listeners are probably bootstrapping their companies at this point. That's what I'm doing. So is it largely when we're talking like bioscience and tech, when you're going to need to develop a lot of the physical product?
I'll give you a very short answer because I'm not a venture capitalist,
Mm-hmm.
and I've personally never raised money, so this really isn't my forte. I've watched hundreds of people come through CIC who have done that.
Yeah.
But raising venture capital is incredibly hard, as anybody who's chased it can attest to. And I think in general, it's probably the type of thing that I'm sure there's some universal truths, but from my perspective, it really is sort of almost a case-by-case situation. Most of the companies would be best served, I think, delaying it as much as they can, meaning get your business further developed. I know venture capital firms every single day send companies packing and say, come back when you've done X, Y, and Z. So I think that there's a lot of mythology around the idea that you meet somebody, you tell him your idea, and he offers you $2 million. And that isn't to say those things have happened, but I think you need to do a tremendous amount of work, a ton of sweat equity, and really show that you've made progress, which takes oftentimes a long time.
Yeah. Okay. You have a pretty diverse role. My understanding is, I think you said you could be considered like the CEO of CIC St. Louis, and CEOs are largely, they're just making lots of decisions. What are the scope of these decisions that you're making over the course of a day? What does a day look like for someone who's managing a space like this?
It's pretty awesome because it really is sort of every day is different. But you are constantly balancing everything from staff happiness and staff management to customer service to sales and the P&L of the overall business. We are part of an ecosystem. So we spend a tremendous amount of time with partners in the St. Louis community. Some of these are partners in sort of the general sense, like we're all helping St. Louis together, and you scratch my back, I scratch yours, in terms of come to my event and speak here and there. And then others are more strategic partners where we have defined relationships and sort of contracts. And so managing those relationships, making sure that CIC's in the community with the proper brand, doing the right things, keeping your sort of ear on the ground. The day goes by super quickly.
Yeah.
And it's, I work in an office, but I don't even have a desk. So it's not even a desk job. I'd rather sell the desk to a company. So it's a little bit of a combination of sort of hotel manager / mayor / executive in the company, where the things that are really on my radar right now in late 2016 are challenges related to growth. So we're looking at taking on more space, working with developers who are building new buildings, and they're building them with us in mind and sort of teeing up future leases, things like that. So
and that's in St. Louis and cities that you have yet to.
Right, exactly. So to be clear, the CSC was founded and is every day run by our CEO, a guy named Tim Rowe, out of Cambridge, who's the mastermind behind this whole thing. And he's been sort of my mentor on every day since I've been at CSC, which has been for about 10 years. We are, as a company, expanding as quickly as we can to new cities. Right now, we are our first location outside of Massachusetts was St. Louis. Now we are in Miami, Florida, and in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And we have several other cities that we are teeing up on the East Coast, as well as other cities in Europe. And now we are looking into Asian markets as well, which is also as well as other cities in other parts of the United States. So this whole concept of shared office space at a scale that does move out of the the local, hey, there's a vacant building over here and I can, ask my uncle for 30 grand to help me find furniture and turn it on and hang my shingle. Those are awesome, and I celebrate those. But if you want to do things that are in the tens or hundreds of thousands of square feet, which cost multi-million dollars to build them out, it becomes a very different adventure. And there's just a few companies now in the United States that are leading the way. And we happen to be the oldest by about 3x. And in a way, I've gone back and forth in terms of how I feel about how fast we've grown. Because I see other businesses that are much younger than CIC growing at leaps and bounds. And I think there's something we can learn from that. But our growth has been a lot more deliberate. And so I think in the end, we will find that it was better to sort of be slow and steady than it would to be too focused on just scale for the sake of growth.
Yeah. And I mean, the idea of shared workspace is now sort of in the popular frame. People know what
it's becoming its own sort of industry.
Yeah. Where do you expect to see it going in the next?
It's for those of us who are in it, it's a really interesting situation because it is it's an industry that's sort of unfolding in real time. And I think that it's going to only grow. If you look at, across the United States, how much commercial real estate there is, this sort of co-working shared office space business represents a tiny little fraction of it. And I think that that's only going to grow significantly because it economically works. It takes away arguably one of the most expensive and complex parts of starting a company. And I think what we're probably going to see is this model of full service grow beyond the early stage company into mid-tier business, small companies that are established, into a situation where even corporations are going to find how we remove the complexities of hiring staff to run this thing, and the virtues of sort of a concierge type of environment are going to be really interesting to them. So I see this as potentially becoming something that challenges the fundamentals of commercial real estate, and to where I suspect, and we're starting to already see this, is some of these large commercial real estate companies that have been doing the same thing for decades start to wonder how do they do this? How do they get into this? And that's very natural. It makes sense. That's one of the ways.
Would companies still, or do you see companies still hiring general virtual assistant teams and outsourcing a bunch of their stuff, or is your staff maybe taking care of a lot of the administrative things like the virtual assistant might?
For our company in particular, and I think this is true of most co-working spaces, we're not, we don't get into the business of providing administrative support to companies. We really are a bit more sort of operations focused and sort of community focused.
Okay.
But we draw the line at, actually getting hands-on involved in the companies themselves.
Gotcha. What's been the most surprising thing to you about your role? And you said about 10 years with CIC.
I have been really pleasantly surprised by, I remember when I first started working with Tim Rowe at CIC, most of my background was in nonprofits. And I had this true sense, like many people, I think you too, of everything that I need to do has to meet my sense of altruism. And my need to feel like I'm serving a greater purpose, which is why I've been attracted to nonprofit work for most of my career. So moving into a business where on the surface it seemed like I'm working both for a for-profit and selling real estate or office space, I sort of was wondering where the romance would come and where the value would occur. And 10 years later, I can say this is the most altruistic experience I've ever felt in my professional life. The amount of good that CIC is doing has completely flipped my sense of the virtues of a for-profit company. And there's a couple reasons for that. Partly, there's a lot of people like me who work at CIC, including the CEO. This is a visionary and a guy who, at the end of the day, he's joked about sort of just, at some point he'll just take his shoes off and go teach classes in Africa or something, and he just really does. He wants for nothing. I mean, he rides his bike to work, takes the bus, and and there's something really wonderful about that. More importantly, though, a place like CIC very quickly, to me, revealed itself to be not I stopped looking at it very quickly from the lens of I'm selling real estate to this is a community that we're developing that serves a very wonderful and important group of people. And this is namely entrepreneurs who are chasing their own dreams, and they're usually working on something that is doing some good for the world. It's solving some problem. Yes, we do have some guys that are working on apps for video games that are just silly, and that's cool too, whatever, no judgment. But, it's when you get to work with a guy like Rich Miner, who's building Android, which is going to be serving half the world in terms of improving the way how we communicate, or, energy companies that are building underwater hydropower that harnesses the tide to create energy that's stored. A million different organizations that are working on fighting disease. When you put them all together in a space and you're part of the platform, you do walk in and out of work every day with a greater sense of mission. And that's not something that I was expecting when I first jumped in.
That's awesome. That's great. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about yet that you think is important for people to know about your co-working or community building or CSC?
No, except that anybody who's listening to this, wherever you are in the world, if you think that an organization like CIC's, our website is cic.us, check us out, because we are looking to grow into new markets. And I really do believe that a business like ours, even at the cost and scale that we require, this could work in cities as small and as seemingly broken as Detroit, Michigan, to as big as New York or Tokyo or Hong Kong, and truly everything in between. I was born in Rochester, New York, and there are cities, there's all sorts of reasons why, when I go back to visit family in Rochester, I'm like, this could work in there, in a city like Rochester. Where you lived in Boulder and in Colorado, it's already a flourishing sort of startup community. Hopefully it's just a matter of time before CIC gets into some of these other cities in the United States. And our growth into the Miami market is really helping us sort of see a vision into Latin America. And as I said, we literally just opened up doors in the Netherlands, and now we're looking at other places, including in Germany and Poland and France. So this is not an American thing. The sort of spirit of entrepreneurship is something that I think is innately human. And reach out to us, reach out to me, because we never know where the next opportunity will come. We're really open to finding the right partners.
Cool. Yeah, and I'll definitely have your contact information in the show notes for everyone, and CIC and all the information. I've got a final question. I think we have time for one more that I ask everyone, and that's, what's your definition of adventure?
My definition of adventure is I'm really thinking about my experience in St. Louis, because this was truly the most adventurous thing I've done, and it wasn't jumping off a cliff. I think it was facing true risk and a significant level of fear, and having the willingness to embrace it and walk towards it regardless of what might happen, and knowing that you'll be okay.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome.
I moved my family to St. Louis, and this was the first time CSC was outside of Cambridge, and most of the wisdom 3 years ago was what this was a higher price point, full service, fancy build out co-working model in St. Louis wouldn't work, and I believed it. And so I can tell you now, 2.5 years later, that it's working incredibly well. But it was the scariest moments of my life was when I really had doubt that CSC would be successful in St. Louis. And yet my family was out here, and my little kids were meeting their neighbors and trying to get comfortable in a new school. And so it rocked me to my, it really was, your brain starts to really mess with you when you're gripped by sort of uncertainty and fear, and the the courage to just get up and trust that you will survive. In looking back, that was an adventure, I've fallen off my bike going down hills that were too steep for a bicycle before. This was scarier than that.
Yeah, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And actually, let me just ask you, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
My email,
okay.
Which is Dougan at CICTR.com, DOUGAN at CICTR.com. I'm on Twitter. I suck at social media, but it's at Dougan too.
Okay.
And it's my birthday today, so that's the only reason I'm looking on Facebook. But I'm on Facebook too. There you go.
Yeah, I should have said that at the beginning. Thanks so much for taking an hour out of your birthday and spending it with Art of Adventure listeners, and appreciate it.
Cool. Anytime.
All right, a great conversation with Dougan Sherwood. Hope you guys enjoyed that episode. And I'm curious, do you work from home? Do you work from a co-working space? Do you have a team? Does everyone work together, or do you have remote people? Do you use virtual assistants? I'm curious about where the adventurous listeners of the show are working. So leave me that in a comment. I like to have people leave their takeaways from an episode in the iTunes reviews. It's cool. It serves a double purpose of helping the iTunes algorithm keep the show up in the rankings so that other people can find out about the information in the podcast. And so if you do leave a comment, you'll be entered to win a free lifetime membership. I'll do a drawing every month into the Adventurous Entrepreneurs community, which is normally $600 a year. And you get all sorts of sweet digital nomad training. And if you are curious and you are thinking about starting a business so that you can travel the world, let's talk. Come sign up for a coaching strategy session with me. Send me an email, derek@dereklaudermilk.com, or head to the coaching page on the website. That's all for today. Now it's your turn to go out there and be adventurous.